Your brain physically changed shape while you read that title. Not metaphorically, literally. Right now, as you process these words, microscopic connections inside your skull are being pruned, strengthened, and rebuilt in real time. That is not science fiction. That is Tuesday. Fact number 1. Your brain rewires itself in under 48 hours. In 2014, researchers at Stanford University using two-photon microscopy, essentially a live-action camera inside a living brain, watched dendritic spines, the tiny connectors between neurons, form and dissolve within 24 to 48 hours of a new experience. These aren't metaphorical changes in thinking. These are physical structural changes, actual new branches growing on your neurons like trees sprouting new limbs. The study, led by neuroscientist Dr. Carl Diceroth, confirmed that a single novel experience could produce visible, measurable, anatomical rewiring within 2 days. 2 days. Think about that. You watched a documentary last Tuesday. Your brain today is physically different because of it. Visual note: show a color-coded time-lapse infographic of dendritic spine growth over a 48-hour period. Use bright teal for new spines, red for pruned ones, against a dark neural background diagram. Fact number 2. London taxi drivers grew measurably larger brains. In the year 2000, neuroscientist Eleanor Maguire at University College London published a study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences that genuinely rattled the scientific world. She scanned the brains of 16 licensed London taxi drivers, people who had spent years memorizing the knowledge, London's notoriously complex 25,000 street map, and compared them to 50 non-taxi driver controls. The result: the taxi drivers had significantly larger posterior hippocampi, the region of the brain associated with spatial navigation. And here is the part that makes scientists still talk about this study 25 years later: the longer a driver had been on the job, the larger that region was. It wasn't genetic. It wasn't random. Their job physically sculpted their brain tissue over time. The brain grew to match the demand being placed on it. Visual note: display a side-by-side hippocampus diagram, a bar chart overlay showing average hippocampal volume in cubic millimeters for taxi drivers versus controls, labeled cleanly in blue and gray. Fact number 3. Blind people rewire their visual cortex to process touch. Here is a fact that sounds like it belongs in a science fiction novel. People who are blind from birth, people who have never once processed a visual signal, use their visual cortex to read Braille. Not their touch cortex. Not their language cortex. Their visual cortex. A landmark 1996 study published in Nature by Alvaro Pascual León demonstrated this using transcranial magnetic stimulation. When researchers temporarily disrupted the visual cortex of congenitally blind Braille readers, the subjects could no longer read Braille accurately. Their visual cortex had been completely commandeered by their fingertips. The brain didn't let that real estate go to waste. It simply reassigned the territory. And in sighted people who were blindfolded for just 5 days, researchers in 2008 found the same temporary takeover beginning to occur. 5 days of darkness was enough to start the rewiring process. Visual note: use a labeled brain diagram infographic with color-blocked regions, highlight the visual cortex in orange with arrows showing tactile signal rerouting, displayed as a flowchart. Fact number 4. You can see with your tongue, neuroplasticity makes it real. In 1969, neuroscientist Paul Bach-Guarita built a device called the Tactile Visual Substitution System, a chair fitted with a grid of 400 vibrating pins pressed against a subject's back, connected to a camera. Blind participants learned to see objects using the vibrations on their skin. But the truly mind-bending upgrade came in 2003, when Brainport Technologies developed a device that sends low-level electrical signals through a postage stamp-sized electrode array placed on the tongue. Within hours of training, blind users could catch a ball. They could read letters. They could navigate a room. Brain imaging confirmed that their visual cortex was processing the tongue signals. Their brains had rerouted the visual experience through their mouths. The tongue became a working eye. The FDA cleared an updated version of the Brainport V100 device in 2015, and it is currently used in clinical rehabilitation. This is not a concept. This is a product. You can buy it. Visual note, show a clean infographic diagram of the brainport electrode pad, with signal flow arrows connecting tongue brainstem visual cortex, using academic color coding, no surgical imagery. Fact number 5. Learning a new skill for just 2 hours triggers measurable neural rewiring. Most people assume neuroplasticity is a slow process, years of practice, decades of habit. A 2005 study published in the Journal of Neuroscience by researchers at the University of Zurich completely dismantled that assumption. Participants learned a simple finger tapping sequence, think of it like a tiny piano exercise, for 2 hours. Just 2 hours. Post-session MRI scans showed a measurable increase in gray matter density in the primary motor cortex. Not increased activity. Not more blood flow. Actual increased gray matter density, visible on a standard MRI. 2 hours. To put that in perspective, that is less time than most people spend scrolling social media in a single evening. Every 2-hour window of focused skill practice is quietly, physically expanding your brain. Visual note, display a before and after color gradient MRI diagram side by side, not real scan imagery but a clean illustrated academic infographic showing gray matter density change in the motor cortex region, highlighted in warm amber against a blue brain outline. Fact number 6. Your brain prunes itself aggressively every single night you sleep. While you are asleep tonight, your brain will destroy millions of synaptic connections on purpose. This sounds catastrophic. It is actually genius. The process is called synaptic homeostasis, and it was formalized in the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis by researchers Giulio Tononi and Chiara Sorelli at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 2003. During waking hours, your brain forms enormous numbers of new connections as you experience the world. By the end of the day, this synaptic overload would make the brain inefficient, too noisy to function well. Sleep is the brain's editorial process. During slow-wave sleep, the brain systematically weakens and eliminates the low-priority connections made during the day, while strengthening the high-priority ones. The result, you wake up with a leaner, more efficient neural network. Sleep is not the brain going offline. Sleep is the brain doing its most precise rewiring work. People who sleep fewer than 6 hours per night, research from UC Berkeley shows, have measurably impaired synaptic pruning, meaning their brains accumulate neural clutter that degrades memory and decision-making. Visual note, infographic showing a timeline bar, awake, synapse formation in green, asleep, targeted pruning in purple, with a branching neural diagram illustrating before sleep clutter versus after sleep efficiency. Fact number 7. A violinist's brain map is physically lopsided, and you can measure it. In 1995, researcher Thomas Elbert at the University of Constance published a study in Science that showed string musicians, violinists, cellists, viola players, had dramatically enlarged cortical representations for the fingers of their left hand, the hand that does the complex fingerwork on the strings. The right hand, used mostly for bowing, showed no such expansion. The brain's map of the left hand had physically grown to allocate more processing real estate to those fingers. And the earlier a musician began playing, the more pronounced the asymmetry. Musicians who started before age 12 showed nearly double the cortical reorganization compared to those who started later. Your brain doesn't just practice music. It physically becomes a music brain. And this isn't unique to musicians. Identical studies have found enlarged hand area maps in Braille readers, enlarged auditory cortex regions in people who grew up bilingual, and expanded prefrontal regions in long-term meditators. Visual note, show a color-coded homunculus diagram, the classic brain body map illustration, with the left-hand fingers region highlighted and visually enlarged compared to a control diagram, labeled cleanly with size comparison percentages. Fact number 8, neuroplasticity can physically shrink the brain, and stress is the trigger. Everything we've covered so far has been about the brain getting bigger, better, more connected. Here is the dark side, and it is the most important fact in this entire video. Chronic psychological stress, not the brief, productive kind, but prolonged, unresolved stress, physically shrinks the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is your brain's command center, decision-making, impulse control, emotional regulation, long-term planning. A 2012 study published in Biological Psychiatry by researchers at Yale University measured prefrontal gray matter volume in 103 healthy adults and found that those who had experienced chronic life stress showed statistically significant reductions in prefrontal cortex volume. Meanwhile, the amygdala, the brain's fear and threat detection center, grew larger in the same individuals. Neuroplasticity had literally traded rational thinking capacity for a bigger alarm system. But here is the fact that turns this around completely. A 2011 study from Massachusetts General Hospital, led by Dr. Sarah Lazar, found that 8 weeks of mindfulness-based stress reduction, 27 minutes of daily meditation, produced measurable increases in prefrontal cortex gray matter density and reduced amygdala volume. 8 weeks. 27 minutes a day. The brain that stress shrank, mindfulness rebuilt. Neuroplasticity works in every direction, and the direction it goes is largely up to you. Visual note: display a split infographic, left panel, bar chart showing prefrontal cortex volume reduction under chronic stress, with amygdala growth indicated. Right panel, reverse bar chart showing MBSR-driven prefrontal recovery. Use clinical blue and red color coding, clearly labeled, no graphic imagery. Let's bring this all together, because here is what these 8 facts are actually telling you: your brain is not hardware. It is not fixed at birth, locked in at 25, or declining on a set schedule. It is a living, physically responsive organ that reshapes itself around your experiences, your habits, your sleep, your stress levels, and your attention every single day. The London taxi driver's hippocampus grew because of where they drove. The violinist's cortex expanded because of what they practiced. The meditator's prefrontal cortex rebuilt because of where they directed their focus. You are not stuck with the brain you have today. You are actively building the brain you will have tomorrow. The question neuroplasticity forces you to answer is, what are you building it with? Subscribe to Moonlit Minds for daily mind-blowing facts that will change how you see the world.